Centuries-old stone bridges still stand against raging rivers. These are not just monuments of rock, but monuments to secrets. Medieval master builders achieved the impossible with techniques now lost to history. They worked without modern machinery, relying on knowledge so powerful it was guarded by shadowy guilds. By the end of this, you will understand the hidden forces that built these stone giants. We will uncover why certain methods were deliberately erased and how builders defied physics itself. What forgotten truth is locked within the stones beneath your feet? Behind these stone giants stood figures shrouded in secrecy, the master masons. These were not simple laborers. They were the architects of the impossible, bound together in powerful guilds that operated like the tech giants of their day. To become a master mason was a lifetime pursuit. A boy would be apprenticed for 7 years, learning not by reading books, but by doing. He would mix mortar, haul stones, and slowly, under the watchful eye of a master, learn to read the language of stone itself. This knowledge was their most valuable asset, and they protected it fiercely. Every member swore a sacred oath of silence. The most critical techniques, the formulas for superior mortar, the precise angles for arches that could bear immense weight, were never written down. This wisdom was passed from mouth to ear, a living library of construction secrets that died with the holder if not carefully taught to the next generation. This oral tradition was their firewall. It prevented rivals from stealing their methods and ensured that any community needing a bridge or a cathedral had to come to them, making these guilds incredibly influential. They held the keys to defying rivers and gravity, and they never let them go easily. What were they so desperate to protect? The answer lies not in the stone, but in the empty spaces between them. That empty space between the stones holds the ghost of a far older empire. The medieval master builders may have been secretive, but they were also brilliant inheritors. Many scholars now believe their genius was not born in isolation, but was instead a rediscovery of ancient Roman engineering, knowledge that had been lost for centuries after the empire's fall. The Romans were master hydraulic engineers, and they left behind clues in their own crumbling bridges. One of their most powerful techniques was the cofferdam. To build a bridge pier in the middle of a rushing river, Roman engineers would drive 2 concentric rings of wooden piles into the riverbed. The space between these walls was then packed with clay, creating a temporary, watertight enclosure. They would then simply pump the water out, leaving a dry workspace on the river bottom. This allowed them to lay foundations directly on solid ground, a fundamental secret to building piers that would not wash away. Imagine the medieval masons encountering the remnants of these Roman works, studying the stumps of ancient piers. They would have reverse engineered this method, perhaps using their own locally sourced materials to achieve the same incredible result. But the Romans had another, even more potent secret, a magical ingredient known as pozzolana. This was a volcanic ash found near Rome. When mixed with lime and water, it created a concrete that could not only set underwater, but actually grew stronger for centuries. This was the miracle behind Rome's massive harbors and aqueducts. The medieval builders lacked access to this specific ash, but they pursued their own alchemical formulas for mortar, desperate to recreate a substance with similar, water-defying properties. So why was this Roman connection so often ignored or suppressed by the very chroniclers who recorded the bridge constructions? The medieval world viewed itself as a new, divinely ordained era, a break from the pagan past. Admitting that their greatest architectural achievements were improvements on Roman blueprints would have undermined their own cultural and religious narrative. It was far more prestigious to attribute a magnificent bridge to the genius of a contemporary master mason, or to divine inspiration, than to the long-lost engineers of a fallen empire. This deliberate silence created a perfect storm, where revolutionary Roman technology was reborn, applied, and then its true origins were quietly buried. The master masons, sworn to secrecy, became the sole guardians of this resurrected knowledge, making their power seem even more mystical and self-made. But if they were building on ancient ideas, what was their own truly original, groundbreaking contribution? The answer lies in the one element that defines the medieval skyline: a shape so powerful it could channel immense weight into a graceful curve. That graceful curve of the arch would be nothing without its hidden anchor, a foundation laid in the most hostile environment imaginable. The river itself was the master mason's greatest adversary, a relentless, shifting force of nature. Before a single stone of the arch could be laid, they had to conquer the riverbed. Their most ingenious weapon against the current was a deceptively simple structure known as a crib. Picture a massive open-topped wooden crate, built like a log cabin, but far heavier and stronger. These crates were constructed on the riverbank, then painstakingly floated out to the precise location for a bridge pier. Here the true test began. Workers would fill the floating crib with vast quantities of stone, rock by heavy rock, until its own immense weight forced it to sink straight down through the churning water, settling firmly onto the river bottom. This sunken crib became an instant, stable island, a temporary fortress against the flow. It acted as a cofferdam, but one built from the riverbed up. Once it was securely in place, teams could work inside its protective wooden walls, pumping out the water to reveal a dry patch of riverbed. Now, the real foundation work could begin, often involving driving long wooden piles deep into the earth to create an unshakable base for the stone pier that would rise above. But how did these men even survive this process? Working inside a partially drained wooden box in the middle of a powerful river was a dance with death. The current constantly pushed and strained against the structure. A single weak joint, a sudden shift in the river bottom, or an unexpected flood could mean the crib would collapse or be swept away, taking everyone inside with it. They had no modern diving equipment, no reinforced steel, only timber, stone, and relentless courage. This was not a profession for the faint of heart. It was a battle of wits and will against a liquid giant, fought in the dim, muddy light beneath the water's surface. Every successful foundation was a monumental victory, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of overwhelming natural power. Yet, even with the foundation secure, the true architectural magic was only just beginning. How could they possibly create a structure above that would not only stand, but would actually grow stronger under the immense weight it was designed to carry? The true breakthrough emerged not from the foundation, but from the shape that crowned it. While the Romans perfected the semicircular arch, medieval masons discovered a more dynamic and powerful form, the pointed arch. This was not merely an aesthetic choice, it was a structural revolution. The secret lay in how the arch managed force. A round arch pushes its weight outward and downward with equal, spreading pressure. This demands incredibly thick, heavy walls and piers to contain that outward thrust, limiting the height and elegance of the structure. The pointed arch, however, behaves differently. Its distinct shape channels a greater portion of the load almost straight down, directly through the supporting piers. This fundamental change in physics meant the entire structure could be taller, narrower, and far more stable. The immense weight of the bridge and the traffic upon it was now focused into a more vertical pathway, drastically reducing the dangerous sideways push that could topple a round arch over time. This allowed master builders to construct bridges that seemed to defy their own mass, with taller, more graceful openings that offered less resistance to floodwaters. Think of the difference between pushing outward on the walls of a cardboard box, which easily collapses, versus pressing straight down on its top, which it can withstand much more easily. The pointed arch was the architectural equivalent of that downward press, a masterful deception of gravity itself. But why was such a brilliant innovation kept a secret, whispered only within guild halls? Because this knowledge was power. A bridge that could carry heavier loads, last for centuries, and withstand the fury of a river was a priceless asset to any town or kingdom. The formula for the precise angle of the point, the exact curve of the stonework, was a form of intellectual gold. If every mason knew how to build this way, the guild's exclusive status would vanish. By guarding the geometry of the pointed arch, they ensured their services remained indispensable. They held the key to not just building a crossing, but to building a legacy in stone that could endure the ages. This single architectural leap allowed them to span wider rivers and create the iconic, towering bridges that still define the medieval landscape in our minds. Yet, even the perfect arch was only as strong as the invisible glue that held it all together. That invisible glue was only part of the puzzle, for the stones themselves had to be found and moved in absolute secrecy. Procuring the perfect stone was a clandestine operation that began in the dead of night. Master masons would send small, trusted teams to scout remote quarries, searching for bedrock of a specific density and grain. The most prized stone was often miles from the building site, creating a logistical nightmare that had to be solved without attracting attention. The sheer weight of a single block, sometimes exceeding a ton, made overland transport a public spectacle, something the guilds could not allow. Their solution was a masterpiece of hidden logistics, relying on the silent, dark highways of the medieval world, its rivers. Under the cover of darkness, massive blocks were loaded onto wide, flat-bottomed barges. These vessels, pulled by teams of sworn men, would drift with the current, their movement masked by fog and the simple fact that few traveled the waterways at night. This was not just about stealth, it was about physics. Water transport drastically reduced the friction that made moving such weights overland so difficult and conspicuous. The journey was timed with the precision of a military campaign, often scheduled for the wetter seasons when rivers ran high and could bear the burden more easily. But what happened when the river did not reach the build site? For the final leg of the journey, the guilds employed another secret weapon, the sledge. This was not a simple sled. It was a heavily reinforced wooden platform, often greased with animal fat or set upon rollers made of felled logs. Teams of oxen, their hooves muffled with sacking, would pull these colossal loads along carefully prepared tracks. Greasing the path was not enough. The true genius was in the preparation of the route itself. Guild workers would travel ahead, laying down a temporary road of wooden planks or even freezing the ground in winter to create a slick, solid surface that minimized resistance. This entire intricate process, from quarry to foundation, was designed to be invisible. By controlling every aspect of the stone's journey, the masons ensured that the origin and quality of their primary material remained a complete mystery to outsiders. A rival watching a bridge rise from the river would have no idea where the stone came from, how it got there, or why it was so strong. This secrecy was a shield, protecting not just their methods, but their very monopoly. The silent nighttime voyage of a stone barge was as crucial to their power as the pointed arch itself. But once these perfectly sourced stones finally arrived at the riverbank, they were still just raw, shapeless rock. How did a block of stone become a key that could lock an arch into place for 1,000 years? A raw block of stone held no power until it was transformed. This transformation was the true art of the bridge builder, a process of carving geometry from chaos. The man who performed this alchemy was the banker mason. He did not work on the dizzying heights of the scaffold, but in a quiet, sheltered workshop on the riverbank, seated at a stone table called a banker. His task was to turn an irregular block into a perfect, predetermined piece of a three-dimensional puzzle. His most crucial tool was not his chisel, but a template. These templates, carved from thin wood or sheet metal, were the guild's most guarded blueprints. They represented the exact shape and angle required for each unique stone in the arch, the pier, or the parapet. The master mason would provide these patterns, and the banker mason's job was to replicate them in stone with unerring accuracy. He would press the wooden profile against the rough block and scribe its outline. This was the first cut, the commitment to a perfect form. Then, with a series of specialized chisels, each with a distinct purpose, he would begin to remove everything that was not the final stone. A punch created a rough surface, a claw chisel refined it, and a final polish with a flat chisel could leave a finish so smooth it felt like glass. The true test of his skill, however, was in the joints. The sides of each block that would press against its neighbor were not cut flat. They were meticulously shaped with a slight, almost imperceptible bevel. This created a V-shaped joint, wider on the inside face of the block and narrower on the outside. When two such stones were pressed together, the angled faces locked, preventing the block from shifting inward under the immense pressure of the arch. This was the secret behind structures that required little or no mortar. The mortar was not the primary glue, it was merely a filler. The real strength came from the perfect, interlocking geometry of the stones themselves, each one holding its neighbor in a mutual, unbreakable grip. The final act of precision was a secret language of marks. As each stone was finished, the banker mason would carve a unique symbol onto its face. These were not random scratches. They were assembly instructions. A simple triangle or a series of lines told the workers on the scaffold exactly where that stone belonged in the rising structure, and which way it should face. This ensured that a complex arch comprising hundreds of individually carved stones could be assembled by a team with minimal verbal instruction, like a silent, well-rehearsed orchestra building a symphony in stone. The entire process, from template to symbol, was a masterpiece of pre-industrial engineering, a secret system that allowed for the rapid and flawless construction of monuments meant to last for millennia. But how did they test this perfection, ensuring that a single flawed block would not doom the entire bridge when the wooden supports were finally removed? The perfect stone was only half the secret. The true magic lay in the substance that filled the spaces between them, a medieval mortar so potent it could outlast the very rocks it bonded. This was not the simple lime mortar we might imagine. The master masons were alchemists of the building site, and their cauldrons bubbled with bizarre, closely guarded recipes. While the base was often slaked lime, the transformative ingredients were pulled from the local landscape and the community's pantry. In some regions, they discovered that adding finely crushed terracotta, the same clay used for roof tiles, created a chemical reaction. The fired clay, rich in silica, would combine with the lime to form a primitive version of Roman concrete, a mortar that could actually cure underwater and grow harder with age. Other guilds experimented with organic binders, substances that seem strange to us now. There are records of mortar mixes incorporating egg whites, which acted as a powerful plasticizer, making the mixture more workable and incredibly durable as it set. Even animal blood was sometimes used, its albumin proteins creating a tough, water-resistant matrix as the mortar hardened. Each of these ingredients was a calculated experiment, a trial and error process spanning generations to find the perfect local formula. The goal was always the same, to create a mortar that was not just a filler, but an active, strengthening component of the bridge. This secret knowledge was so valuable that a master mason would often mix the final batch himself, under the cover of night, adding the crucial ingredients away from prying eyes. The apprentices might prepare the base lime, but only the master knew the final, alchemical step that turned common materials into stone glue. This is why the mortar in these ancient bridges is often harder than the stone blocks themselves. Modern cement, for all its strength, can become brittle and crack over decades, but the medieval recipes created a mortar with a degree of flexibility, a slight give that allowed the entire structure to shift and settle over centuries without fracturing. It was a living, breathing joint that moved with the bridge, absorbing the shocks of floods and frost. So the next time you see a centuries-old bridge, remember that its strength is not just in the stone you can see, but in the ghost of a secret recipe, a potion of crushed tile, egg, and blood, mixed in darkness and lost to time. How did these builders, without modern chemistry, know that such unusual additives would work? The answer lies not in laboratories, but in a forgotten language of trial and observation, a deep listening to the materials of the earth itself. That ghost of a secret recipe was useless without a temporary skeleton to support the arch. This wooden framework, known as centering, was the master mason's most vulnerable creation, a complex timber structure that had to hold the entire weight of the unfinished stone arch until the final piece was locked into place. Designing and building the centering was a secret art in itself, a three-dimensional puzzle of stress and support. It was not a single massive block of wood, but a carefully engineered lattice of beams and braces, each one calculated to bear a specific portion of the load without sagging or collapsing. The curve of the centering had to be perfect, a flawless replica of the inner curve of the intended stone arch. Any error in its shape would be permanently cast into the stonework, a fatal flaw that could weaken the bridge for centuries. The guild's most guarded scrolls and templates were often not for the stone, but for the precise angles and joints of this temporary wooden frame. Its construction was a spectacle of timberwork, rising from the river piers like the bare bones of a future giant. But the true moment of terror came not during its assembly, but during its removal. How do you take away the very thing holding up hundreds of tons of stone without causing a catastrophic collapse? The answer lay in a deceptively simple device and a profound understanding of physics. The entire centering structure was not built as one solid piece. It was designed to be disassembled from the center outward in a carefully controlled sequence. The key was a central timber known as the king post, which supported the crown of the arch. This post rested not on the riverbed, but on a complex system of wedges and sandboxes. When the master mason was certain the mortar had set and the keystone was fully locked, he would give the signal to begin the striking operation. Workers would slowly, methodically knock out the wedges supporting the king post, lowering it by minuscule increments. Sometimes they used sacks of sand with precisely cut openings, allowing the sand to drain out grain by grain, lowering the centering with impossible smoothness. This gradual release allowed the stone arch to slowly settle into its final position, transferring its weight from the wooden frame onto its own perfectly engineered shape. The groans and creaks of the settling stone were the most terrifying sounds a mason could hear, a symphony of stress that told him whether his calculations had been correct. A successful strike, ending in silence, was their greatest triumph. It meant the wooden skeleton had served its purpose and the stone bridge now stood on its own, a permanent testament to the secrets hidden within its temporary support. That final stone was more than a piece of the puzzle. It was the heart of the entire structure. The placement of the keystone was not a simple construction task. It was a sacred ceremony, a moment when engineering and superstition became one. The entire worksite would fall silent as the master mason himself, often dressed in his finest tunic, would oversee the ritual. The keystone was the wedge-shaped block at the very crown of the arch, the final piece that would lock all the others into a state of permanent compression. Before it was lowered into the waiting space, it was often blessed by a priest, anointed with holy water, or passed through the smoke of burning herbs to purify it and ward off evil spirits that might weaken the bridge. The workers believed the bridge had a soul, a spirit that needed to be appeased and strengthened from the very start. This was not mere pageantry. It was a psychological necessity for men who were about to bet their lives on the perfection of their work. As the keystone was painstakingly lowered, sometimes using a special silver-plated tool reserved only for this purpose, the tension was palpable. Every man present knew that the groaning centering beneath them was about to be relieved of its burden, transferring hundreds of tons of stone onto the arch itself. A perfect fit meant success. A flawed one meant catastrophic failure. But the secrets did not end with the stone's placement. Often, a small cavity was carved into the back of the keystone before it was set. Into this hidden chamber, the masons would place powerful talismans. A freshly minted coin, bearing the face of the reigning monarch, was common, a symbolic payment to the spirits of the river for safe passage. Sometimes it was a sprig of evergreen for everlasting strength, or a scroll inscribed with a protective prayer. These offerings were never meant to be seen again, sealed forever within the bridge's heart. They were a final, desperate act of magic, a hidden sacrifice to ensure the structure's permanence and to bring good fortune to all who crossed it. The master masons understood that their strength came from both the unerring precision of their geometry and the profound power of collective belief. The bridge was not just stone and mortar, it was a thing of faith, its most important component hidden from view, locked away for eternity. That hidden ceremony was merely the prelude to an even greater battle against the river itself. Before a single crib could be sunk or a foundation stone laid, the masons had to perform what seemed like a miracle. They had to move the water. A flowing river does not politely step aside for construction. Its relentless current would smash their temporary works and drown their efforts before they began. Their most audacious solution was the temporary dam. This was not a permanent wall of stone, but a brawny, sacrificial barrier built from whatever the local landscape provided. In forested regions, they constructed timber cribs, not to sink as foundations, but to be filled with rubble and stacked across the river, creating a leaky but effective bulwark. In other areas, they drove massive wooden piles in a line across the watercourse and wove walls of willow branches between them, a technique known as wattle work, which was then plastered with thick clay to slow the flow. These dams were engineering marvels in their own right, built with the full knowledge that they would be torn down by the very force they held back once the work was done. But a dam alone was not enough. You cannot simply stop a river, you must give it somewhere else to go. This required the creation of a diversion channel, a man-made canal that would coax the river away from its natural bed. Digging this channel was a colossal undertaking, done entirely by hand with shovels and muscle. The masons would calculate the precise gradient needed to make the water want to flow down this new path, ensuring it was just steep enough to be attractive to the current, but not so steep that it would erode their new channel into a raging torrent. They were, in effect, performing temporary river surgery, redirecting its lifeblood so they could operate on its heart. For smaller streams or to manage specific sections, they employed a more subtle tactic, strategic deflection. They would build low walls of rock and timber, known as groins, jutting out from the bank at careful angles. These groins did not block the flow, but gently nudged it, like a crowd controller guiding a large group. They would deflect the main force of the current away from a vulnerable worksite, creating a pocket of calmer water where a pier could be built in relative safety. All of these techniques were born from brutal, unrecorded trial and error. A miscalculated dam could burst, washing away a season's work. A poorly angled groin could intensify the current it was meant to deflect, scouring away the riverbank and undermining their progress. The true secret was not in a single perfect design, but in a deep, intuitive reading of the water itself, a knowledge passed down through generations of masters who had learned to listen to the river's voice and negotiate with its power. That silent negotiation with the river led to one of the most brilliant and enduring designs in medieval engineering, the cutwater. These are the triangular or curved projections you see on the upstream side of a bridge pier, and they are far more than decorative stone. They are the bridge's permanent shield, a geometric solution to a relentless, grinding problem. A simple, square pier acts like a wall in the river, forcing the water to slam directly into it. The current pushes with immense force, but the greater danger comes from what the water carries. During a flood, a river becomes a battering ram of logs, branches, and other debris. A square pier would catch these projectiles head-on, the impact shaking the entire foundation over years, slowly but surely weakening the masonry. The cutwater changed everything. By tapering the pier to a sharp or rounded edge, the medieval masons turned a wall into a blade. When a log or a mass of water hit the cutwater, it did not strike a flat surface. Instead, it was instantly split, deflected smoothly to either side of the pier, its destructive energy harmlessly channeled away. This single design feature eliminated the brutal, direct impacts that could crumble stone over decades. But the cutwater's genius did not stop at deflecting debris. Its shape was a secret weapon against an even more insidious enemy, scour. Scour is the silent killer of bridges, the process where the river current, as it whips around a pier, digs a deep hole in the riverbed. Water accelerating around a square corner creates powerful, downward spinning vortices that act like underwater drills, sucking up sand and gravel from around the pier's foundation. Over time, this can undermine the base, leaving it unsupported until the pier cracks and collapses. The elegantly sloped sides of a cutwater prevent this. They guide the water around the pier in a much smoother, wider curve, preventing those destructive vortices from forming. The current flows around the obstacle with less turbulence, leaving the riverbed intact and the foundation secure. The specific angle of the point was not arbitrary. Through observation and accumulated wisdom, The masons learned that a very sharp angle, while excellent for splitting debris, could sometimes create its own small, problematic eddies. A slightly more rounded nose often provided the perfect balance, offering maximum deflection with minimum turbulence. This precise geometry, calculated without a single modern fluid dynamics equation, was a product of deep, intuitive understanding. It was a secret written in the language of water and stone, a testament to their ability to not just build against nature, but to build in harmony with its forces. The cut water was their lasting peace treaty with the river, a simple, stone shape that granted a bridge the gift of centuries. Behind the soaring arches and precise stonework lay a human mystery as complex as the structures themselves. The master mason, whose name might be carved in a hidden corner, stood at the apex of a vast and often invisible workforce. He was the conductor of an orchestra of labor, but the musicians were a diverse and coerced assembly. The skilled hands belonged to the Freemasons, the elite craftsmen who carved the stones and set the arches. These men were the aristocracy of labor, traveling from one great project to the next, their wages and privileges protected by the guild's power. Yet for every one of these skilled artisans, there were dozens, sometimes hundreds, of other workers whose stories were never recorded. The brute force, the endless hauling and digging, fell to local peasants conscripted through a feudal system known as the corvée. This was not a paid job. It was a tax paid with their own bodies. A lord or a local abbot could demand that every able-bodied man from the surrounding villages present himself for a certain number of days each year to work on the bridge. They arrived with their own simple tools, their backs destined for the most grueling tasks, digging diversion channels, hauling rubble, and mixing vast vats of mortar under the watchful eye of the master's foreman. Their lives were considered expendable, a cost factored into the project from the very beginning. Alongside them worked another shadowy group, the monastic brothers. In an age where faith and infrastructure were deeply intertwined, monasteries often initiated and funded bridge projects as acts of charity and civic duty. The monks provided not just money, but muscle. Lay brothers who had taken vows but were not priests contributed their labor as part of their spiritual devotion, moving stone and timber with a belief that their physical toil was a prayer in action. This created a stark and unspoken hierarchy on the riverbank. The Freemasons, with their secret knowledge, operated with a degree of autonomy and respect. The monks worked with a sense of divine purpose, but the conscripted peasants labored under the threat of punishment, their presence a form of taxation that drained the vitality from their own farms and families. Why is the true scale of this workforce so obscured in the records? The chronicles of the time, written by monks or court scribes, celebrated the patron who funded the bridge or the master mason who designed it. The anonymous masses who provided the sweat and blood were deemed unworthy of mention, their collective sacrifice fading into the river mud. This deliberate silence hides a profound truth, that these timeless monuments were built not just on stone and secret geometry, but on a foundation of forced labor and spiritual fervor, a human pyramid where only the tip was ever meant to be remembered. That hidden pyramid of labor required a river of gold to sustain it. Building a stone bridge was one of the most expensive undertakings of the medieval world, a financial black hole that could consume a town's entire wealth for generations. So where did the money come from? The answer is a complex web of faith, commerce, and hidden economics. The most visible source was the bridge toll, but this was not a simple fee for passage. The right to collect tolls was often granted by a king or a bishop to a specific individual or a bridge-building guild, creating a powerful and often resented monopoly. A merchant carting wool to market, a farmer driving his pigs to town, even a pilgrim on foot, all had to pay. This steady, dripping stream of coins formed the financial lifeblood that paid for the skilled masons and the ongoing repairs. Yet tolls alone were rarely enough to fund the initial, colossal investment. This is where the concept of spiritual salvation entered the ledger. The church taught that funding a bridge was a pious act of charity, a work of mercy that could shorten one's time in purgatory. This belief gave rise to a powerful financial instrument, the indulgence. Wealthy patrons, from merchants to nobles, would donate vast sums to a bridge fund. In return, they received not a share of future tolls, but a signed document from the church granting them a reduction of their celestial sentence. They were literally buying their way into heaven with stone and mortar. These patrons were not just seeking salvation, they were also buying social prestige. A merchant who made his fortune on trade routes tainted by usury could cleanse his reputation and his soul by underwriting a critical piece of infrastructure. His name might be carved into a bridge stone or recorded in a charter, granting him a legacy of civic virtue that outshone the murky origins of his wealth. The financial networks that managed these funds were surprisingly sophisticated. Funds were pooled from dozens of sources. Tolls from one bridge might be used to start construction on another miles away. This created a hidden financial ecosystem where the commerce of one town could literally pave the way for the growth of the next. But this system was also vulnerable to corruption. There are records of bridge masters embezzling funds, of toll collectors demanding extortionate payments, and of indulgences being sold long after the construction debt was paid. The money that built these marvels was as multifaceted and sometimes as shadowy as the construction secrets themselves, a necessary alchemy that turned coin, faith, and ambition into enduring stone. That river of gold often flowed directly from the monastery's coffers. While kings collected taxes and merchants paid tolls, the church provided something even more valuable: the architectural knowledge preserved in its silent scriptoriums. Within these hallowed walls, monks meticulously copied not just religious texts, but also crumbling manuscripts from the ancient world. Among these were the engineering treatises of Rome, the very texts that held the secrets of the arch, the cofferdam, and hydraulic principles. The master masons, many of whom were illiterate, could not read these scrolls themselves, but the educated monks, the abbots and priors who commissioned the bridges, could. They acted as the translators and facilitators, interpreting this ancient wisdom and conveying its geometric principles to the master mason in a form he could use, through templates and verbal instruction. This partnership was the engine of innovation, a fusion of clerical learning and artisanal skill. A bridge was never just a practical crossing, it was a testament to God's glory and the church's benevolence. By sponsoring these colossal projects, a religious order demonstrated its piety and its commitment to the community, earning the loyalty and gratitude of the people. But this charity was also a brilliant strategic move. A new bridge created a new, more efficient trade route, and who controlled the land at both ends of that route? Very often, the same monastery that funded its construction. They could charge tolls, direct travelers to their guest houses, and ensure that the wealth generated by this new artery of commerce flowed directly back into their own estates. It was a self-perpetuating cycle of influence. The church provided the initial capital and the ancient knowledge. The guilds provided the labor and the secret techniques, and the resulting structure solidified the power of both. This hidden influence extended beyond mere economics. Many bridges incorporated small chapels right into their structure, sacred spaces where travelers were encouraged to give thanks for a safe crossing, and to leave a small donation. These chapels were not just places of rest, they were powerful reminders of who made the journey possible. They were spiritual toll booths, reinforcing the message that safe passage was a divine gift, administered by the church. So the next time you see an ancient bridge with a chapel upon it, look past the stone and see the grand design. It was not merely a feat of engineering, but a masterstroke of soft power, a permanent monument that channeled both earthly commerce and heavenly faith toward the same silent guardians. Yet that flow of commerce and faith also made these bridges irresistible targets. Many were not just open pathways but cunningly designed fortifications, their true purpose hidden in plain sight. Look closely at the oldest stone bridges, and you might notice their towers are not merely decorative. These were fortified gatehouses, controlling a vital choke point. A bridge was the one place where an army, a raiding party, or even a tax-evading merchant had to pass through a narrow, predetermined corridor. By building a massive stone tower at one end, the bridge's owners could control all movement, sealing the passage with a heavy iron portcullis or thick oak doors reinforced with iron bands. This transformed the bridge from a passive structure into an active, defensible position. A small garrison stationed in the tower could hold the crossing against a much larger force, forcing them into a deadly bottleneck where numbers meant nothing. But the deception went deeper than the obvious gatehouse. Some bridges were engineered with a more devastating secret, removable deck sections. Imagine a central span of the bridge, looking perfectly normal, but secretly designed with a break in the stonework. In times of invasion, defenders could dismantle this pre-planned section, either by levering out keystones or removing a wooden deck that filled the gap. Suddenly, the bridge was useless to the enemy, creating a wide, impassable moat in the middle of the river. This was a strategic sacrifice, a way to sever a vital artery for an invader while knowing it could be repaired once the threat had passed. It turned the bridge itself into a disposable weapon. Even the seemingly solid parapets that kept people from falling into the water were often part of the ruse. What appear to be simple decorative patterns or irregular gaps in the stone are sometimes carefully positioned arrow slits. These narrow openings, wider on the inside than the outside, gave defending archers a wide field of fire while leaving them almost completely protected. An attacker trying to storm the bridge would find themselves exposed to a hail of arrows from defenders they could barely see, firing from within the very fabric of the bridge. This is why the historical record is often so quiet about these military features. To publicly boast of a bridge's defensive strength was to admit vulnerability, to announce to rivals that your lands could be invaded. It was far safer to let the bridge appear as a simple work of civic improvement, a charitable project for travelers and traders. Its true nature as a military asset remained a whispered secret among the lords and master masons, a dormant power that only awakened in times of crisis. The peaceful crossing you see today was, for centuries, a calculated kill zone. A finished bridge was not the end of the work, but the start of a silent, centuries-long conversation with decay. The master masons knew their structures were living entities, constantly shifting and settling, and they designed a hidden system of maintenance to keep them alive. This knowledge was arguably more valuable than the initial construction secrets, for it guaranteed the guild's relevance for generations. The most perilous task fell to a special class of workers, the underwater divers. These men were not equipped with any apparatus we would recognize. They were often local men with a profound familiarity with the river, and they worked by holding their breath or sometimes using a primitive diving bell, a large, upside-down cauldron filled with air that was lowered over them. Their job was to feel their way along the submerged piers and cutwaters in the frigid, murky water, searching for cracks or areas where the current had scoured away the foundation. They would then patch these voids with a specially prepared, quick-setting mortar, or drive new wooden piles into the riverbed, all while fighting the current and the cold. Every repair beneath the waterline was a desperate gamble against an invisible enemy. The mortar used for these patches was its own guarded recipe, often different from the original construction mix. It had to set rapidly even in wet conditions, and its formula was a closely held secret. Some guilds used mixtures with extra lime or crushed brick to encourage a faster chemical set, while others might add proprietary organic compounds that acted as water-resistant binders. A master mason would inspect the bridge annually, tapping stones with a special hammer and listening for the hollow sound that indicated a loose block or failing mortar. This diagnosis was an art form, a skill passed from master to apprentice through years of careful practice. The specific repair technique for a cracked arch stone, for instance, was never written in a manual. It was a hands-on lesson, showing an apprentice exactly how to prop the arch, remove the damaged stone, carve a perfect replacement, and reset it without compromising the structure's integrity. This oral tradition of maintenance was the guild's ultimate insurance policy. By keeping the precise methods for diagnosing and healing their bridges locked away in living memory, they ensured that communities remained dependent on them. A town council could not simply hire a new group of laborers to fix a crumbling pier. They needed the guild masters who held the mental blueprint for its weaknesses and the secret recipes for its repair. This created a permanent, symbiotic relationship between the bridge and its creators. The stone giant would stand for centuries, not simply because it was well built, but because it was perpetually watched over by the same families of craftsmen who passed down the whispered words and tactile knowledge that kept the river at bay. The true secret to a bridge's immortality was not a one-time spell of construction, but a ritual of care repeated for generations, a legacy written not on parchment, but in the silent, enduring stone. These secret rituals of care rested upon a hidden mathematical order. The strength of a medieval bridge was not a matter of chance, but of sacred geometry, a language of ratios and shapes believed to reflect divine harmony. The master masons used these principles intuitively, their rules passed down not in equations but in the proportions of their wooden templates. One of the most powerful of these secrets was the golden ratio, a proportion where a whole line relates to its larger segment as that larger segment relates to the smaller one. This created a relationship of approximately 1 to 1.618, a balance the human eye finds inherently pleasing and structurally sound. They did not calculate this number. They built it using simple compass and straight-edge constructions, geometric dances that produced the perfect proportions every time. This ratio was the silent guide for the arch itself. The height of an arch from its springing point to its keystone was often set in a golden ratio relationship to its width. This specific proportion distributed the compressive forces so efficiently that the arch seemed to hold its own weight effortlessly, channeling the immense load down through the piers in a perfect, balanced flow. The spacing of the piers across the river was also governed by this invisible rule. Placing the piers at intervals based on the golden ratio created a rhythm that harmonized with the flow of the water. It prevented the dangerous, synchronous vibrations that could occur if the piers were spaced evenly, a phenomenon where the river's current would pulse against each pier at the same moment, building destructive force. Instead, the golden spacing broke up this rhythm, forcing the water to flow around the obstacles in a more chaotic, and therefore less damaging, pattern. Why encode this knowledge in geometric symbols rather than written numbers? For the medieval mind, geometry was a direct connection to the mind of God, the architect of the universe. A circle represented unity and perfection, a triangle symbolized strength and the Holy Trinity, and the complex patterns derived from these shapes were seen as blueprints for a stable creation. By building their bridges according to these sacred patterns, the masons were not just ensuring physical stability, they were imbuing the structure with a spiritual fortitude, weaving a permanent prayer into the very fabric of the crossing. The bridge was their cathedral laid horizontally, every arch a testament to a cosmic order they believed could be measured, drawn, and built. A master mason's most powerful ally was not a tool, but the turning of the year itself. These builders possessed a deep, cyclical understanding of the natural world, scheduling their Herculean tasks in harmony with the seasons to make the impossible merely difficult. They knew that to fight a river head-on was folly, but to wait for the river to offer a moment of weakness was pure genius. Their greatest opportunity arrived with the deep cold of winter. A raging river, when the frost bit hard enough, would transform into a solid, stationary platform of ice. This natural bridge gave them direct access to the riverbed, a chance to survey the foundation site and even begin preliminary work without battling the current. They could drill into the frozen earth to test its stability or drive the first wooden piles, all from the safety of the ice. But the real seasonal magic came from harnessing the freeze not just as a platform, but as a transportation network. The same stone blocks that were so difficult to move over soft summer ground became manageable on sleds gliding across frozen rivers and fields. The masons would wait for a hard freeze, then orchestrate the movement of tons of stone along these icy highways, a silent, efficient process that bypassed the muddy, impassable roads of other seasons. When the spring thaw came, the rising waters would actually help them, floating the heavy barges they had loaded during the winter, carrying the stone the final miles to the site. The dry, stable days of summer were reserved for the precise, delicate work that demanded perfection. This was the season for laying foundations in diverted river channels and for the meticulous carving and setting of the arches. Dry mortar could cure properly, and the stable, warm ground prevented the subtle shifts that could misalign a nascent pier. Every phase of the construction calendar was a calculated move in a chess game against nature. This knowledge was not written in any guild ledger. It was carried in the collective memory of the craftsmen, passed down as stories of a project that failed because they started the piers too late in the fall, or a brilliant success achieved by moving all the stone during a particularly long and severe winter. This intimate dance with the weather was as crucial to their success as any secret mortar recipe. They did not simply build with stone, they built with time itself, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to make the river itself work for them. These secret river highways operated under a perfect disguise. A flotilla of barges loaded with stone would not travel alone, isolated and conspicuous. The master masons arranged for their precious cargo to move hidden within the normal, bustling traffic of medieval commerce. A convoy might consist of 10 boats, but only 3 would be carrying bridge stone. The others would be loaded with wool, grain, or timber, creating the appearance of a standard merchant caravan. This simple deception was a masterstroke of logistics. To any observer on the riverbank, from a curious peasant to a rival lord's agent, it was just another trade shipment. There was nothing special to see, nothing worth investigating or raiding. The stone, the most vital component of the bridge, was camouflaged as common cargo, its value and destination concealed in plain sight. The organization of this hidden network required absolute trust and coordination. The bargemen themselves were often sworn to the guild or were members of a separate, equally secretive watermen's guild. They communicated with a series of subtle signals, flags by day or lantern patterns by night, to coordinate their movements without shouting orders across the water. Their routes were carefully planned to avoid the main trading hubs and towns where officials might ask too many questions. They favored the smaller, quieter tributaries, moving under the cover of river mist or the deep darkness of a moonless night. This was not just about avoiding theft, it was about controlling information. The masons understood that the mystery surrounding their work was a source of their power. If no one knew where the stone came from or how it arrived, the entire process seemed less like skilled labor and more like magic. The river, the very force they sought to conquer, became their most trusted accomplice, its currents silently carrying the bones of the future bridge right to its feet, all while wearing the ordinary face of everyday trade. These silent stone giants are covered in a secret language, carved for eternity by the hands that built them. Look closely at the weathered surface of an ancient bridge, and you will find more than just rock. You will find messages from the past. The most personal of these is the mason's mark. Each master and his apprentices had their own unique symbol, a simple geometric design chiseled into the stones they shaped. This was not a signature for fame. It was a practical and sacred act. It was a claim of responsibility, a way for the guild warden to inspect the work and know exactly who had carved each perfect block. If a stone failed, the man whose mark it bore would be held accountable. But these marks were also a form of spiritual signature, a craftsman's prayer etched into his work, dedicating his labor to God and ensuring his identity would be part of the bridges so long after he was gone. Far more public and more terrifying are the grotesque figures leering from the parapets. We call them gargoyles, and their monstrous forms were deliberately chosen. A dragon, a demon, or a twisted hybrid creature served as a spiritual guardian. Medieval belief held that evil spirits could be warded off by their own likeness, that a carved demon would confuse and frighten away real demons lurking in the mist over the river. These figures were the bridge's permanent protectors, using fear to keep malevolent forces at bay and ensure the safety of all who crossed. Beyond marks and monsters, the masons hid deeper puzzles. Dates of construction were often encoded not in numbers, but in complex symbolic codes or acrostics within Latin inscriptions. A name might be hidden within the first letters of a prayer carved into a cornerstone, visible to all but readable only to the initiated. A common motif was the Sheila na gig, a startling female figure displaying her exaggerated sexuality. While its exact meaning is debated, it is widely believed to be an apotropaic symbol, meant to use the power of life and fertility to avert the evil eye and death itself. It was a stark, raw plea for protection carved in stone. Even the simplest floral patterns often held meaning, with ivy symbolizing eternal life and the oak leaf representing strength and endurance. Every bridge was a book written in a code of symbols, a permanent record of the fears, faith, and fierce pride of the people who built it. They were speaking to the future, ensuring their stories, both sacred and secret, would never be washed away. London Bridge was not merely a crossing but a floating neighborhood of stone and timber, a bustling street suspended miraculously over the Thames. For over 600 years, it stood as a testament to medieval audacity, its back weighed down by multi-story houses, shops, and even a chapel, all defying the river's pull. The secret to supporting this impossible weight lay in its unique, almost chaotic foundation. Unlike a modern bridge with a few slender piers, the original London Bridge was a forest of stone, supported by 19 irregular arches sitting on massive piers. Each pier was not a single column but a broad, boat-shaped island of masonry, protected by sturdy starlings, wooden platforms filled with rubble that encased the base. This created a wider footprint on the riverbed, distributing the phenomenal load of the bridge's own superstructure and the town upon it. But this engineering came at a terrible cost. The dense cluster of piers acted like a dam, constricting the river's flow and creating the famous, lethal rapids between the arches. Shooting these narrow gaps was a professional task for boatmen, a white water ride through the heart of the city that drowned the unlucky. This very design, which created a permanent, roaring waterfall, also served a hidden purpose. The violently churning water prevented silt from settling around the starlings, scouring the riverbed clean and ironically preventing the slow, silent undermining that doomed so many other bridges. Yet the legends whisper of an even darker ingredient in its longevity. Folklore insists that the foundations were strengthened with the bones of the dead, that human remains were mixed into the mortar or sealed within the starlings as a spiritual sacrifice to appease the river gods. While no archaeological evidence confirms this, the tale persists, a ghost story woven into the bridge's very stones. It speaks to the profound fear and reverence these builders held for the Thames, a force so powerful that only the ultimate offering could guarantee their bridge would stand. The chapel dedicated to St. Thomas at Becket at the center of the bridge was the public face of this devotion. But the hidden, whispered rituals were the true soul of its construction. London Bridge was a paradox, a thriving city street built upon a foundation of brutal physics and chilling superstition. A marvel that stood for centuries because its creators understood that to conquer a river, you had to respect its power and perhaps fear it. The Pont d'Avignon stands as a haunting silhouette against the Provençal sky, its 4 remaining arches reaching for a distant shore they were never meant to touch. This famous ruin, immortalized in song, is a testament not to success, but to a relentless, hidden war waged beneath the water. The River Rhône was its unconquerable foe, a torrential giant whose secret weapon lay buried in its bed. Unlike the stable, rocky bottoms that supported other bridges, the ground beneath the Rhône was a shifting, treacherous mix of sand and gravel. This loose alluvium provided no solid purchase for the massive foundation piers. Each stone pillar, instead of resting on an unshakable base, was essentially built upon a moving, liquid foundation. The current would constantly scour and suck the sediment from around the piers, creating invisible cavities that left them precariously unbalanced. No matter how perfect the arch or how strong the mortar, a bridge standing on sand was destined to fall. The builders fought back with ever wider piers and protective starlings, but the river always won, washing away their work in a series of catastrophic collapses that spanned centuries. Yet the local population saw a different story unfolding. They whispered of divine hands guiding the construction. The most enduring legend speaks of a young shepherd named Bénazid, visited by Christ himself, who was told to build a bridge across the violent river. When the skeptical Bishop of Avignon demanded proof, Bénazid is said to have single-handedly lifted a colossal stone, and placed it as the first foundation block, a miracle that inspired the entire community to take up the cause. This myth provided a spiritual explanation for the seemingly impossible task, transforming a battle against geology into a sacred quest. It gave the people the hope and motivation to rebuild, again and again, after every devastating failure. The true secret of the Pont d'Avignon is not how it was built, but why it was rebuilt so persistently in the face of certain ruin. Its incompleteness is its most powerful lesson, a permanent reminder that even the most advanced medieval secrets could be defeated by forces they could not see, and that human faith could be as formidable a building material as stone itself. Perhaps the most famous testament to this alchemical approach to mortar is the legendary Charles Bridge in Prague. Its story begins not with stone, but with the stars under the direct command of Emperor Charles IV. The emperor, a man deeply immersed in the esoteric sciences of his time, did not simply order a bridge to be built. He commanded it to be born under a perfect celestial alignment. His court astrologers calculated the most auspicious moment, a time when the planets were arranged to bestow strength and permanence upon the structure. The first foundation stone was laid at exactly 5:31 in the morning on July 9, 1357, a moment chosen not for convenience, but for cosmic power. This was not mere superstition. It was a profound belief that the universe itself could be harnessed and woven into the fabric of the bridge. The entire construction was a ritual, with the river and the sky as its chief participants. But the celestial secrets were matched by a tangible, and rather bizarre, ingredient here on Earth. For centuries, a persistent legend has claimed that the mortar binding the sandstone blocks was strengthened with the most unusual additive, raw eggs. Whole cartloads of eggs were supposedly gathered from villages across the kingdom and mixed into the slaked lime, along with milk and even wine. To a modern mind, this sounds like a fairy tale, but the chemistry is surprisingly sound. The proteins in the egg whites, particularly albumin, act as a powerful binding agent. They create a tougher, more flexible mortar that is less prone to cracking as it ages and settles. It was an organic plasticizer, a secret recipe that gave the mortar a resilience pure lime could never achieve. This was the ultimate fusion of folk wisdom and practical science, a recipe born from generations of observing how natural materials interact. The bridge's iconic status, lined with statues of saints, was the public face of its purpose, a sacred pathway. But its legendary durability, allowing it to survive centuries of floods and wars, came from the hidden world of astrological timing and alchemical mortar. The Charles Bridge stands not just as a beautiful monument, but as a physical embodiment of a world where science, magic, and faith were still inseparable, a perfect stone paradox frozen in time. These stone sentinels have guarded their secrets for centuries, but now the fog has cleared. Our journey across these ancient arches reveals a truth more profound than any single technique or hidden guild. The greatest secret of medieval bridge building was not a magical mortar recipe or a stolen Roman blueprint. It was the human spirit itself, a relentless fusion of courage, faith, and observation that turned impossible dreams into enduring stone. These builders listened to the whispers of the river and the language of the stars. They saw potential in eggshells and animal blood, and they organized armies of labor with the precision of generals. Their legacy is not locked away in a lost manuscript. It stands in plain sight, in the graceful curve of an arch that has carried generations. The next time you cross an old stone bridge, pause for a moment. Place your hand on the weathered parapet and feel the cool, rough texture. You are touching the culmination of 1,000 hidden hands, a million silent sacrifices, and a forgotten world of wisdom. That bridge is a conversation with the past, a permanent monument to the idea that humanity's deepest mysteries are not always lost to time. Sometimes, they are built right into the world around us, waiting for a curious eye to finally see them. If you have uncovered any local bridge secrets or know of a legendary crossing in your own part of the world, share those stories in the comments below. And for more journeys into the hidden corners of history, be sure to subscribe.